And then childhood contributing factors. You guys are going to love this one. One mother followed her daughter to school and physically forced her to eat the remainder of an unfinished breakfast as a pause. Why that pause? As opposed to, could that possibly be a consequence of, what was trying to be the help? And then there were all these articles and calling them gorgeous waifs, and the whole fashion anorexia factor came. And then there was this may have been the first Dear Abby. I'm not sure. I went searching, Well, I call my young staff the younglings. I had them go searching. They find things. And, it was really, there was all the stuff about being thin, but that's all we knew, that part about being thin. That it was a women's disease. 98% of them are female. Usually 11 to 24 years old, from upper class. And then what's so funny about this article is it says, one paragraph says that this clinic hospitalizes everybody, and the next paragraph from another clinic says we don't hospitalize anybody. We were scrambling all over. But one thing I found, and I thought this was so interesting, 1978 article, where this person says, lots of people have been misguided into believing that normal, healthy young girls can be trapped into the disease by dieting. That's not true. There's always underlying emotional pathology, and we would add today biological as well. And the media actually helped in some ways. Craig didn't know I was going to talk about this. It helped. Bulimia was not recognized, and he already said that. It wasn't recognized in the 70s. It had been written about a little bit, but without much notice. So, and Craig and his research students started researching this behavior called gorging and purging. All these women's magazines found out about it, and they called him up, and he already said, he got 5,000 letters and everything. But what happened is that the media published before he was able to publish his research. And that, because of those 5,000 articles, gave him a much bigger data pool. So that when he did go speak about it here and then went to Toronto to speak about it, it had much more power. And in that sense, the media helped put bulimia on the map. That's me, 1983. And basically during all this, meanwhile, I recovered. And the eating disorder field and I grew up together. We really did. The journal was started in 1982. This was the first article, I think, about me. A girlfriend sent this to me recently, and I thought, oh, perfect for this talk. I was already a teacher, and I was recovered, and I was a therapist treating people. I think this was the first article ever that talked about that. So we're both still learning, the field and I. We're both still learning and growing. And I wanted to give an example of how organizations like F.E.A.S.T can help. I saw my first patient in 1979. 18 years later, I opened my first residential program, and I wrote 2 books. That was a very big year, by the way. And this book, Your Dieting Daughter, was criticized by a F.E.A.S.T member this year, in January of this year. And here's what he said. He wrote me an email. In your Dieting Daughter book, you write that anorexia and bulimia have in common inadequate paternal responses for helping the daughter develop a less symbiotic relationship with her mother. You advise fathers not to focus on their daughter's disordered eating symptoms, but on her feelings. I don't understand why you would advise that, since, if not interrupted, the behaviors may kill or seriously disable her. And if her parents won't act to interrupt the behaviors, then who will? And why are others better qualified than parents to do so? Perhaps you could clarify. And I wrote back. I look back at that old book and I feel so bad about stuff. I'm happy to review any of my material you find inappropriate and re-look at it. And I did. And basically, I even changed the title of this new book. And so the new book is going to talk about antidotes that parents can provide for body dissatisfaction, excessive dieting, and disordered eating. So it doesn't look like what I'm talking about in those things is eating disorders. And when I do talk about eating disorders, I talk about the genetic part. I talk about family-based treatment. Gone now are, and that inadequate paternal response thing was a quote that I took from another book. I thought, did I write that? It didn't sound like me. And, you know, I omitted things like that. And so this is how parents or anyone who's an activist can be involved. I mean, I was open to it, but you got to push to help people be open to it. And even if they're not rewriting their book, maybe they can write an article to talk about the differences in what we know now. So it leads me back to how I was first affected by the first book. And so when The Golden Cage came out and I read it, one of the things that I thought was, wow, that is so accurate about what anorexics did and how they thought. Inaccurate about the whys, but accurate about what. And the thing I want to talk about, I think, for this particular talk in relationship to this book, is how did it affect me and how did it affect other people? I was already well then. But I read this book and thought I hadn't really been good enough anorexic. And there were things that she said in there like they brainwash themselves, getting thinner and thinner gives them so much pride they're willing to tolerate anything. And I thought, I don't know if I was willing to tolerate anything. And I didn't get down to 64 pounds. And actually, for 2 weeks, I started restricting again. Now, luckily, it only lasted a couple weeks, and I realized this is really stupid, and I really don't want to do this anymore. But that informed me in my life as a therapist, and I tell the families and patients, don't read that stuff. Don't read books on eating disorders. It's maybe sometime, not now. Is her, I think, best, I mean, it's great that she does this. She said in the Huffington Post, we don't support putting people who are ill on television. It's wasted treatment. I really don't think it's going to be easy for people to be honest in their treatment, their thoughts, and their counseling while on camera. I totally understood that. There were many, many critics of the show. One of the most ironic critics is going to be the next thing I'm going to show you from YouTube, which is a media free-for-all, by the way, YouTube. And I do not think the irony will be lost on you about this particular person complaining about people with eating disorders being on TV.
Once again, we have a freak show mentality. Let's find the sickest, most emaciated individuals with eating disorders and put them on TV. With all due respect, Tracy Gold, I am adamantly opposed to this show. I do not think parading sick individuals before a camera is going to help anyone. I certainly...
Really? That's what I said when I saw it. Really? Why are you parading your sick self on a camera in front of everyone? But that's the thing we have with YouTube, and we have to know it and understand it and figure out how to work with it. And what I always talk about is, you know, in those old science labs, there's this YouTube thing, and the teacher, you know, filled it with blue water and talked about how it was the easiest way to get the blue water out is to put red water in. So it's putting the good in that we have to do. We have to keep putting the good things in. So here's what Rivka, who is fully recovered now, says about being on the show. The primary fear about the show was that it would glamorize eating disorders. My anorexia was not at all glamorous. I was miserable, my life was empty, lonely, and meaningless, and I hated being sick, and I was honest and clear about it on camera. Life with anorexia was awful, and my treatment options had run out. I was willing to go on TV to get help, and it occurred to me that if I got better, it could help others. I was treated respectfully by the crew, who demonstrated they had my best interest at heart. My treatment providers communicated constantly with the production company and ensured that my treatment and well-being were always priority. I made the choice to go on the show with the sanest part of my brain, the healthy part of me that wanted to recover, and I'm glad I did. My life has transformed. I am recovered. I live a full, meaningful life. I am happy, healthy, eat without fear or anxiety, and have many friends and close relationships. In no way do I regret being on the show. It helped me, and I've heard from others that it helped them. And in fact, I think it's the best decision I ever made. Now, what I did to ensure that that happened, I told you already I knew her. I had the opportunity to treat her, and then funding ran out. I kept her long past any contract that the show said. I decided I'm going to keep her until she gets better. Forget insurance, forget my contract with the show. 9 months it took. But she's well. And that is the commitment that I think if I decided that I have to show somebody, mind you, I already had this other show that didn't air, where all of them were doing well. I was determined to get somebody on the show that did well. And that's a lot of effort and a lot of resources on my part to do it, but those are the kind of things that I think we as professionals in treatment centers can do. So was it wrong or not? My small part had a good outcome, but I wouldn't do the same thing again because they didn't show any of our discussions on genetics, which we had. They didn't show anything about her family or anything about the work that we did with her family, which we did, and they were extremely grateful. But those weren't exciting. And they didn't show what I thought were important therapeutic parts that would help other people. But I would never say never to the media. Rather, how best can we deal with the media? So you heard some tips from Jeff today, and basically besides, there's one part about being an activist, fighting back, working at change and making a difference. And you can also limit the media and what effect you think it's having. I don't even have a TV. I have not had a TV for 12 years now. Although we're building a new house, and it's definitely a little argument I'm having with my husband whether we're going to have one this time around or not. I feel very proud to say that, but I can't be too proud because when I go to somebody else's house or the hotel, have access to your kids' computers, be Facebook friends with your kids, have parental filters for things like YouTube, set up parent quorums at school, communicate, educate yourselves, teach other people. But there's this major question left out here. Does the media contribute? I talked about how they've covered eating disorders, but in some ways this implies, do they contribute to eating disorders? Now, just take a look at that. You would look at that and go, okay, absolutely, yes. One other thing I was able to do, small, but I was able to do it. I actually, if you looked at In Style magazine these days, that is the #1 selling magazine. My sister happens to be the West Coast bureau chief, so you can imagine our fights. I can't believe you put her on the cover, you know. But one thing I did get them to do because of her, no diet ads. You won't see any diet ads in that magazine. I think that does make a difference. Even though I know it doesn't cost me, I think it makes a difference. I was just interviewed about the show Modern Family. I don't know if you guys see that show. So I sneak sometimes, you know, shows. And I knew that they were all losing weight, and I talked about that in the Huffington Post. And I talked about genetics being involved too and things like that. I haven't read the article. I don't know if they put it in. All I can do is continue to try. By 2001, we had this huge game changer, right? Is the media promoting eating disorders? Well, hello. Yeah, in pro-anasites they are, as a lifestyle choice. Parts of my book, the Dieting Daughter book, were taken. I tried to explain the mindset of people with eating disorders to parents, or people even who had gotten caught in extreme dieting and disordered eating. If you aren't thin, you aren't attractive. Being thin is more important than being healthy. I got a call a few years later. Did you write something for a pro-anasite? Horrified. They had taken it. So I had this big complaint. Yahoo bumped them off, but another one just started right up. It was a battle. It keeps popping up, and you try to do what you can do, and then these things happen. You keep fighting back. So, but do these influence people? Does the media, do pro-anasites influence people to have eating disorders? This is a great one, a sign that the media is influencing girls at a younger age. Does this diaper make you look fat? Or how about this one? Supermodels love our pasta. It comes up as easily as it goes down. Now, that's kind of promoting an eating disorder. That was a Hamptons magazine ad for a restaurant.
What?
Yeah, bizarre. But you know what? I remember the name of that restaurant. I will never forget the name of that restaurant, and so that's probably their point, right? So here's the ongoing debate, right? The ongoing debate, $64,000 question, $1 million question. Does the media cause eating disorders? I think Harriet Brown said it best in the statement. I think many people would say if the media caused eating disorders, half the country would have an eating disorder. But the key word there is caused. So I'll leave you with this thought that I always have. Well, I'm going to leave you with two thoughts. And gosh, I think I only have 2 minutes for questions, and I promised I would leave more. I think of people who get eating disorders as our cultural canaries in the coal mine. You know, the miners took the canaries down into the coal mines, and then if the canaries unfortunately died, they would say, this is a toxic environment, we have to get out. Well, certainly I think we have to make more resistant and resilient canaries. Like, what is it about, so the people with eating disorders are the ones that are most maybe susceptible to the environment. Whether it's their brain chemistry, whatever it is, how do we make them more resilient? Through genetics, through looking at temperament, through medication, through actually mindfulness practices and working with things like set shifting in the brain and stuff. But we also have to improve the toxic environment, I think, which includes the cultural pressure to be thin, and therefore I think targeting the media and modeling and bullying are all important. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. As we work out these difficult issues, let all of us remember at the heart of science is an essential balance between two seemingly contradictory attitudes: an openness to new ideas, no matter how bizarre or counterintuitive they may be, and the most ruthless scrutiny, skeptical scrutiny, of all ideas old and new. This is how deep truths are winnowed from deep nonsense. Thank you so much. Thank you. Low battery dismissed. I feel like I have a low battery right now.
For no need to have a low
Can I answer a couple questions? Do I have to go?
If you are open, we do have workshops starting in a few minutes.
Well, I'll answer one or two questions if anyone has them. Yeah.
The one question I have is you mentioned this idea that reducing body image dissatisfaction is helpful. How do you do that? I mean, I have a 7-year-old who doesn't like her body. How do you help a 7-year-old like her body?
Well, you know what? To make a short answer, look up this risk prevention program. It used to be called Reflections. They have just changed the name. Eric Spice and Carolyn Becker just got it back. And actually, there's a lot I could tell you, but it's very specific in how it's done. And it doesn't involve bringing people with eating disorders and saying, don't do it, like the DARE program did not work. It did not work. So, because I can't really answer that now, please look that up. Just look up Carolyn Becker, look up Reflections. I don't know the new name. Do you know the new name? It's called, I think, maybe The Body Project. Mark? Yes. Warren, do you know the new name? It's not Reflections anymore.
No, I don't.
I think it's The Body Project, but if you look up Carolyn Becker, or send me an email, then I'll put you in touch with it, because if you want to know how to do that, you've got to go about it in the way that where they actually have some evidence to back it up, and this does. Anything else? Yeah?
The thing that you said about body satisfaction being a risk factor, I think that with the younger kids coming with eating disorders, like my daughter was 9, she had 0. I mean, I know there's exceptions, but I think the younger populations, that's not necessarily a risk factor for them.
Yeah, you have to think of risk factor just means that we can reduce cases. It's not going to be every case. We just accepted a blind person